How's it going, Grace?
Good.
How's it really going?
It's going okay.
Right now, you're doing okay?
Yeah, right now. Um,
Hit or miss?
yeah, I mean, it's been 4.5 months, so it's not.
December 2nd, right? Is that
Yes.
when Jordy died?
Yep.
Yeah. That that was at night, right?
Yeah. It was
So,
at like 10, I think 10:15 was the official time of death.
yeah. So take us back as hard as I'm sure that is to that. Did you find out that night, I assume, or did you find out the next day?
No, so that was a normal Saturday. Actually, I went out that night with some friends from Annabelle's school, other like moms of kids her age,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't do very often. And as far as I knew, I got home at like 9:30. I went to bed. It was a normal evening. And then on Sunday morning, the 3rd, I woke up to Lucas like kind of shaking my shoulder. And I opened my eyes and he said, Jordy died in a car accident last night, which was just like, I mean, it's not news that you ever are expecting to wake up to. And like with no warning like that, just like I literally went from like peaceful sleep to like that's my new reality. And it felt like being catapulted into a nightmare, like,
Yeah, like, am I still sleeping or? Yeah,
right. Like there's no, you want to be like, no, wait a minute, this isn't true. Like, let me go back in time. Like this can't be happening. This can't be the reality. But I ended up like jumping right out of bed. It like because that just jolted me awake, and I went downstairs and I called my mom on the phone, and I actually don't even really remember what she said exactly. Just she told me that he had been in a car accident, and that they had
was
had.
she the one that called the phone and Lucas answered, or?
So she and my dad had both been calling our cell phones. We're old fashioned, I guess. We don't keep our phones on at night, like we don't keep them in the bedroom.
Yeah.
So we didn't have them. But they had tried calling us probably around like 6 in the morning,
Okay.
and we didn't answer. So they had left a few voicemails just saying, "Please call. It's an emergency." So he had woken up before me and gotten those messages. So he called them back
Yeah.
first.
Figure out what was going on, and
Yep.
yeah, yeah. How did your parents find out?
So they had two state troopers bang on the door, I think around like 5 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess they were able to hear the door, so they opened the door. And I think my mom said that she had like a nasty feeling in her stomach, of course. Like,
Yeah, that's usually not a great news.
no, it's
Yeah,
not a normal experience. And
yeah.
they said, "Are you Jordan Pimentel's parents?" And they said yes. And they said he was in a car crash and he didn't survive. And it took a while for that to like for them to digest that. Like my mom was
Can't
just like,
imagine. Yeah.
"What?" And I think they were with my parents for a while, just like talking things over.
Imagine having that job as a state trooper. Man,
Yeah,
can't imagine.
I
Yeah.
know. So after I got off the phone with my mom, Lucas had gone upstairs to wake up the kids and tell them. And they, of course, they were crying. They were upset because he was a really fun uncle. But we kind of just like got dressed and went over to my parents' house, where my one of my older brothers already was, and then the other one was on his way.
Yeah.
And we kind of just, I don't know, we just like sat and cried and hugged, and
Mm.
I don't know. It's a weird feeling. Like in some ways, there were like moments of numbness where like you can't even really believe what's happening. Like you just can't
Yeah.
believe that it's your reality now.
When did you start getting like details of what happened? And
So that was actually probably one of the most frustrating parts. Like my parents and my children had actually been with Jordy that Friday night, so the night before he died. Like had dinner there. They hung out. He had a dog that they played with, and like it was a really good time. Like just so then the next day, as far as we knew, he had just been like home most of the day, and he was cooking. Like he made a pot roast, and then I guess he went out. He had told somebody that he was going to meet up with a friend, but that friend said that they didn't actually meet up. So we actually had no idea like where he had gone when he was like in the car or what he was doing that night.
Mm-hmm.
And all we knew is that it was a head-on collision. But yeah, we like the details were missing, and it's kind of hard to deal with that like when you have so many questions and like no answers.
Yeah.
And like we were told that it was going to take several months for like accident reconstruction to be completed, and so it was going to be like a long waiting game of finding out details.
And the other driver died as well.
She did.
Yeah. So did that. What was that like? Obviously, just knowing there was someone else involved, and
Yeah, no, it's awful. It's
I mean, it's obviously not you. You didn't, but it's like your brother, and there was an accident, and someone else. Like it just there's other families out. Like that must have been a huge weight as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's horrific, and I obviously I empathize deeply with their pain because they're going through the same exact thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not easy. None of it's easy.
No, just adds another layer to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And like no, I don't know, knowing that, he was the wrong way driver, makes it really tough.
Right. So it's like, his fault, and why was he doing that, and why was he, and you really don't have the answers to those questions, and you may never have the answer. That's tough. It's real hard. So that day when you were just hanging out with your family, just laughing and like what I mean, laughing, crying, and hugging, what what kinds of things did you talk about? What was? Do you remember?
I don't honestly remember talking a whole lot.
Mm.
Like my dad didn't want to talk. And I just like I remember like sitting in this one chair in the living room, like just I don't even know. Like we were kind of all in our own little world,
Yeah.
just like processing. But I do remember I think some of his friends came over. It's hard to even remember who was there because I spent like most of the week at their house and
Right.
like people
Right.
weren't
Yeah.
in and
All
out.
ran together. Yeah.
So it's kind of all a blur.
Were your kids there? Did you?
They
Yeah.
were for a few hours, and they were playing in my parents' master bedroom, which is on the first floor of the house, and it's really big and it has a lot of toys in it. So they were kind of out of the way, but after like a few hours, they were just running around and kind of being noisy. So Lucas ended up taking them home,
Yeah. Yeah.
just so we could, I don't know, relax a little bit.
Not have to deal with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that initial day, what do you remember? Any prayers? Do you remember what you were thinking as far as when it comes
I
to God?
I remember like wanting like in my mind saying like, thank you God that we had 31 years with him. The other feeling that was so dominant that I remember is just that like 3 weeks before that we had celebrated my brother's 31st birthday. And like the profound loss of life and like the potential and like, we all knew that someday he hoped to have a family and like I looked forward to having nieces and nephews from him and like having cousins for my kids and like of course my parents looked forward to having more grandchildren from him and like he was such a hard worker and like everybody who knew him loved him so much and it was just I don't know, just so hard to like wrap our minds around the fact that like his life was so short.
Hmm.
But like I remember like wanting to like, like say thank you to God that we had him for as long as we did.
But
But I didn't like I
You weren't
guess I
feeling
didn't
very thankful.
I didn't feel like comfortable like actually like leading my family in that prayer at that like I didn't want to be like
Yeah.
let's let's pray guys like it was just I don't know. So it was more of like a quiet thing.
Mm.
Um
Yeah. I mean, you you obviously have a lot of faith in your parents and your family. Um, so that's a real test to it, right? I mean, it's like, okay, we're we believe, the Lord's with us and he has a great plan and everything, but Jordy's gone. And like, I remember thinking this is a terrible thought, but like when my mom first died, like I remember thinking I met a woman that just wasn't a very good person at all, and thinking like, why'd you leave her? And I'm like, why am I thinking thoughts like this? But like, you think like potential, everyone loved him. Like why wouldn't God? Why wouldn't you keep him? And maybe not someone else. Not that it's a numbers game,
no,
but
but I think those thoughts are definitely like a normal part of
yeah,
the grief process. I think like a big thing was just realizing and really understanding because it's again it's normal to question God like when something happens like this and
yeah,
think like why did you allow this like and why is this happening to me, why my family, like why do we have to experience this like searing loss that's so painful. But like something that I had to work through was like really trusting that like God loves like his children, more than I ever could, and
yeah,
that like he is sovereign and that
yeah.
he's in control and that like his plans and his purposes are good.
Mm. Even if you
So,
don't see it.
right, even when it's like unbearably painful, like both things can be true. You can be in the worst pain you've ever experienced and still know that God is good.
Mm.
And I had texted Becky McCourt the night that I found, well, the day that I found out Jordy had died, and she texted me back asking if the following day, Monday, she and Shelly and Kelsey could come over to my house and pray with me. And I said yes, of course, and I thought that was really thoughtful. And so they came over on Monday, and Shelly was just like asking me, how, like, how are you feeling? Like, how did, how's
Yeah.
your relationship with God? And I think I was definitely still a little numb, but like I told her, I'm not like at this moment, like I don't really feel that angry with God because like just I know his character,
Mm.
and she was saying like, well, you've had a lifetime of his faithfulness, like,
Yeah.
before this, to like remind you that he is good and that he's still with you, which was definitely true. Like,
Yeah.
so that was helpful.
It's also not, it's just not naturally your personality. Not that you can't get angry, but it's not like you don't want to be angry with God. It's not like you're looking for an opportunity. So
Yeah.
there's some there, but it, some people it's like a natural reaction, and it's not a bad thing. It's just who they are. But for you, it's like I want to see the good in it. It's just must have been a real fight to see any good in it, especially in the early days of that.
Yeah, and like I don't know, in some ways the first few days are just so wild, like you're
Yeah.
kind of running on adrenaline and like it's really weird because you're planning like funeral services and stuff
Yeah.
like and trying to make plans and arrangements that are like nice and you know decent when you're in the worst pain you've ever felt. And I don't even know how that's possible to do with your brain, but somehow God gets you through it.
Mm.
So, in some ways, like I felt like we were so busy,
Yeah.
I almost like didn't have that much time to dwell on it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that happens where you just. That's why I always tell people who are older, like, plan as much as you can so your family doesn't have to worry about it. And
Yeah,
it's always great when they do that because then it's not like, oh, I got to deal with the finances. I got to deal with the, death certificate. I got to deal with the funeral arrangements, all this, and I don't know where anything is. And you're trying to grieve, right? So it's like, as much as we can save our family from that. But when you're 31 years old, no one's thinking like that, you know?
right.
I mean, all of his stuff was left, and you know, and it's just so many pieces to pick up. I can't imagine. Did you work on that together as a family, or like did you have help doing that?
Yeah, so It was, I think, the Tuesday after he died, so a few days later. My mom, my dad, and my two older brothers and I all went to the funeral home together to make the arrangements.
Hmm.
And the funeral director, Bridget, was amazing. Like, she was so compassionate, and like she was able to like keep us on task, but she was also very like sensitive to how sad and difficult it was.
Yeah.
And also my parents' pastor was there too,
Yep.
for extra support. And so, we cried through like picking flowers and picking a casket and like all
Yeah.
those things and like picking verses, and but we were somehow able to do it. And then the absolute worst part of that was that his body was in the morgue.
Right.
And my mom especially just really needed to like see him to get that closure. And I don't know. I feel like people were kind of like, why would you do that? Like, why would you go look at him? Because like he didn't have any like makeup on. He had been cleaned up, but it was just kind of something we all felt like we needed to do because it needed to be more real. So
Hmm.
the funeral director, she like opened the door and was like, "You can go in." And like going in there and seeing him on a table
Hmm.
was like the worst experience of my life.
If you could go back, would you still do that?
I still would,
Hmm.
but it just made it so real. Like you're looking death in the face. And like obviously we all know that like everyone dies, that we're not immortal, that we're not going to be here forever, but it was such like an ugly reminder that like death is real and that like we don't know how much time we're going to have. And I just like I think when I walked in I screamed and my knees buckled. I like fell to the floor and like my brothers were trying to like pick me up and I was like, don't touch me. Like I needed to not be touched.
Hmm.
And it was like absolute agony. It was like the worst thing I've ever done. But like I just feel like it was necessary to get that closure. And
But it was almost like you said you had been numb and sort of natural defenses, and they all.
right, so like it all came like to a boil in that room. And then what I felt like was even weirder was then after it was over, like that was at the very end, so all the arrangements were done. And then we like went to the parking lot and I went right back to being numb and like
Hmm.
we went back to my parents' house and like
That's a lot of emotion in one. Like that's adrenaline. Your
yeah.
body was probably just spent. You know.
Yeah, I found it so strange how like just like, you know, 2 minutes before that I could be reeling so hard and like feeling all these
Do you remember
emotions.
how the rest? Well, your brothers were trying to help you, obviously, but your parents. Do you remember anything about their reaction during that moment?
My mom spent a while like talking to him.
Yeah.
She was crying and then my dad, I don't think my dad stayed in the room very long. Like he went off and was just with the pastor. I don't really remember what my brothers were doing. I think they were a little bit more stoic, but I wasn't really like paying that
Yeah.
much attention.
Yeah. You had a lot going on.
Yeah.
Do you find that in that first week, especially leading up to the funeral, because I know your character, was it a struggle between like taking care of yourself, but also trying to be, I mean, because there's other people that are mourning just as hard as you, your kids, your mom, your dad, your brothers. So you like want to be there for them like you normally would, but you also got it dealing with yourself. What was that like?
Yeah. So like in some ways I remember feeling like kind of like a robot, like because I
Mm,
wasn't like I always I never had a loss before this. Like I have elderly grandparents that had died, but that was kind of natural and expected, so it wasn't like tragic.
right.
And I always wondered like how I would react like when if and when something this terrible happened. And I always kind of envisioned like myself either like raging or just crying constantly, but that's not what it was like. I felt like I was numb a lot of the time, and I wonder if it was because, other people around me were like feeling things, and I felt like I needed to kind of just like turn it off, or if it was just it wasn't anything I was like in control
You
of.
weren't conscious of it. It just was
Um,
walking through it.
but
How well did you sleep during that time?
oh, yeah, I don't think not great.
Yeah.
Definitely like the first few nights it was really hard. Although then there like came a point of just like sheer exhaustion
Yeah.
where I would like sleep and like through the night without waking up in the middle of the night.
Yeah. Your body just couldn't handle it anymore. I'm sure.
Yeah.
It is so much energy that you're expressing emotionally, spiritually, physically. It's exhausting.
But like it's interesting. My mom was very much like a taskmaster. Like she was,
Yeah, I
I
could
don't know,
see
she was
that. I
on
don't
the,
know her well, but I could see that already with her
yeah.
interactions with her. She's like, just let's do this, right? Kind of.
Yeah, so she was like the one who was on the phone and like she was talking to detectives a lot and like there was a lot of like business to take care of that week and then my dad was, just really really sad and like crying a lot and we were all pretty worried about that because he had had a heart attack back in September.
Right.
So we were worried about his health.
Did he go get checked out at all during that time? Make sure. Not much you can probably do,
I
I
don't think
guess.
so, but I think actually it was beneficial that it happened before
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that was like it had been like repaired
Yeah.
and I don't know what would have happened if that hadn't been the case.
Yeah. Why was so? Tell me, your mom was dealing with detectives. Obviously, we know there was an accident, wrong way, kind of thing. What was the conversation with the detectives? Like, why did she need to talk to them? Just
I think just a lot of questions about like I don't know, like what was going on. Like another thing, so we didn't have his phone or his wallet. Like that stuff had been lost at the scene of the accident.
hmm,
So, because it ended up, what happened was it got like flung out of the truck. So that needed to be found. And like I think she was wondering like if they had it in their possession, but they didn't.
okay.
And I'm trying to think what else.
Just those type of
Like
details.
it was
Yeah.
also a really foggy night when he died, and so I think she had questions about like if the weather could have like impacted visibility and like contributed. I don't really remember because I didn't like listen in
Yeah.
on the conversations,
Yeah.
but yeah, I just remember that like she was the one who was able to kind of just take care of like whatever business needed attending to.
What was your relationship with Jordy like? What was it?
Yeah, so he's 2 years younger than me.
Mm,
So when we were really little, we were close, and we like shared our whole childhood together.
mm,
My two older brothers are 7 years older than me, and they primarily lived with their mother, so
mm-hmm.
they came on weekends. But like for most of the time, it was like me and my younger brother in
Right.
the house. So when we were teenagers, we butted heads a little more.
Yeah.
I know we had slightly different personalities. Like I don't know, the kid that was always. He probably would have maybe described it as like a goody two shoes, and not. I'm not saying that he was like a
No.
bad kid, but
No. I get you.
he
Yeah.
just was maybe willing to
Push the
let
boundaries a
let
little bit
loose
more.
a little bit more and have
Yeah.
a little bit more fun.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes too, well, I know from talking to him, like I didn't always do us any favors because like sometimes if he made like a bad decision, I would go run and tell my parents and like that was hurtful to him.
Yeah.
So there was like a little period from like I'd say late high school through like college where we weren't like super close.
Mm-hmm.
But the nice thing was like after college, like when I started having kids and then when he like came back from his college, which was far away, he started like hanging out with the family more again and like he was such a good uncle, and especially like in the last like couple of years before he died, like he was we would spend a lot of time at my parents' house, and like it felt like we had like a good relationship
Yeah.
back again.
Yeah.
So I am grateful that we were able to have that
Yeah.
before he, before he died.
He liked to spend time with your kids and
Yeah,
yeah.
he liked to, chase them and throw them up in the air and do all that fun stuff. And I guess he really got a kick out of Desmond because Desmond reminded him a lot of himself, just with like his energy and like his, I don't know.
Is he, I mean, I know he's Desmond's your only boy, but is that the only nephew that he had?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's different too, you know.
Hmm.
Love the girls, but oh boy, I can finally knock around a little bit.
Right. Yeah, yeah. And he loved to get him riled up and like be loud and like,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm
do
sure
all that.
you always enjoyed that, right?
I was fine with it. Yeah, it didn't bother me.
Yeah. So what during back to that week of, you know, it's like puts life on hold, right? I'm sure you're not like oh, we gotta, you know, people going to work and all that stuff. Pretty much, I'm sure it didn't happen. As you're kind of numb and as you're kind of dealing with that, what then was your prayer life like? What kinds of prayers did you pray? What kind of did you open the Bible? Did you keep your reading plan that you normally do, or did you just say I gotta do something else?
I honestly like you just jogged my memory. I was like kind of afraid to open my Bible that week because I didn't want to read anything about like hell or like condemnation or like anything
Mm,
scary that was gonna like kind of make me
feel worse.
feel worse. Yeah. I don't even remember. I don't remember either like what I prayed specifically or even how much I prayed.
Yeah.
Well, like so after planning the funeral that Tuesday, the next task that me and my brothers shared was putting together a slideshow of
Mm,
photos. You'd think that that like wouldn't take too long, but it took like I want to say like 8 hours over like 2 days, maybe even longer than 8 hours. Like because we were just gathering like all of the pictures from like his childhood and then his young adulthood, and like some of them were old printouts that we were like taking pictures of so we could have them digitally and like editing them so that they would look nice in a slideshow. And that was like really emotionally exhausting to like go down memory lane. And like my dad couldn't even be in the room when we were doing all of that because it was just too raw for him. And like seeing pictures of him was very like triggering. So that was exhausting. And then Thursday, December 7th, was my 33rd birthday and also the day of his wake.
oh,
So,
beautiful. Happy birthday.
yeah, which I figured that that was how it was going to work out, like when
Yeah.
we heard the news. And like, I wouldn't have changed it because I didn't want to, like, none of us wanted to, like, wait and, like, have a weekend to, like, sit with this before the services. We kind of just wanted to get it all
Yeah.
over with.
Yep.
But, but yeah, the day of the wake was really tough. I think we got there at like 3 o'clock, and we had some time privately to like see him in the casket before it was closed. And then people started coming, and it was supposed to be like from 4 to 7, but I think the last people came through at about like 8:15.
Yeah.
So it was just like a really long,
It's a lot of people, I'm sure. With
yeah,
someone that young and that just
yeah.
great person, it's so many people impacted that those are long lines. That must have been great to some degree, but exhausting.
Yeah, it was there I think there were like an estimated 500 people that came through,
Yeah.
which was very humbling and overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it's just like a weird
Did you get a
feeling.
birthday cake at any point?
No, I it
You're
was
like,
honestly the last thing
I know,
on my, like, I
I
just
know.
didn't
Next
care.
year, you can make up for it next
Yeah.
year. Yeah.
But that he had a lot of coworkers that came in, and like the his job was that he was a site supervisor for Devereaux Corporation, which lays pipe.
Mm.
So this was like, grown men who do manual labor for a living, and they were coming through the line with like tears in their eyes, like
Yeah.
saying how much they loved him and how he was such a great boss, and like how much he like touched everyone's lives. And even like the woman who like boarded his dog during the day at daycare, like she came through and she was in tears saying like how he was such a great kid and like how she was so sad that he was gone.
Mm.
So it was really amazing to like hear how much he touched people's lives.
Yeah, that's a real blessing, but
But it's hard,
it's
yeah. I
so
mean, because
hard.
obviously, like, we all thought he was wonderful. Like, he's our
Mm.
brother, our son, our relative. But, we don't get to see, like, what his interactions are like, at work and with everybody else. And
Right.
just, hearing how much he meant to everybody
Yeah.
was
It
really
also
special.
it also puts you face to face where you're like, this is the kind of stuff that really matters, you know. Something I say a lot at services like that, just be like, it gets all of us, including me, thinking, well, what are they going to say about me? Like, who am I impacting rather than am I worried about all the dumb stuff that life it doesn't really matter? And you're
Right.
like, this is the stuff that matters. I'm sure it's not like Jordy walked around thinking that either. He's 31. He's just living his life, but who he's impacting, that's what lives on
Right.
for all of us, you know?
And so then the next day was the funeral. And
Yeah. Yeah, what was that like?
that was,
I mean, I was there, but for you, I'm talking about.
right, right. No,
Yeah.
I know what you meant. So in true procrastination fashion, I got home from the wake the night before, and like everybody was in bed, and I think it was like 9 o'clock, 9 to 11 was when I like fine tuned the eulogy that I was gonna say. Like I
Mm.
had sort of written it like earlier, but I seem to work best under pressure, so I like really like got all the things I wanted to say, and then I, finally collapsed into bed. And then the next morning, the plan was to meet at my parents' house at like I think 8:30 because the limo was gonna pick us up and drop us off at the church at 9. And I was nervous because I was speaking in front of a bunch of people,
Yeah.
and it's just it's an event that you're not excited about, but it has to
No.
happen. Something that I found comforting was that when I was driving to my parents' house along Central Turnpike in Sutton, there was a big tractor trailer truck on the opposite side of the road, and above the truck bed, in big blue letters, it said Jesus. And like, I mean, that's just a little thing, but it was just like a reminder, like, yeah, Jesus is with me. Like, he's here, he's among us this day. Like,
Mm.
it's gonna be a hard day, but he hasn't abandoned us. Like, I don't know. I thought that was cool timing that I happened to drive by that on the way to the funeral.
Yeah, you know, you think of that truck driver and he's just like, I don't know, I'm just gonna do this. And
Yeah.
not realizing, I don't know, who knows? Maybe it'll like who knows what it'll do. Probably make people angry, but you know, and meanwhile he has no idea that just having that brought comfort to someone who had experienced such loss. You know, again, just we don't know how we're impacting people that we won't know. You know, maybe I'm assuming the truck driver was a believer, so he had that right. So you'll see him in heaven someday, and maybe that's a conversation you'll be able to have. You know, I always like to think like that. You know, the people we impact without any idea that we're impacting them. You know, but that's a God thing that He just said, yeah, you need this to remind you.
Yeah, that was how I felt. Like, it was a big comfort, and it was kind of like, okay, I can do this. Like,
Yeah, that so the wake and the funeral and the whole process is so hard. We kind of live in a day and age where there's more and more people not doing anything when they, especially when it's a heavy loss, like with Jordy. So, what would you say? I mean, obviously we can. We're not, people got to do what they got to do. Like nobody's judging somebody. It's not like a sin to not have something. But was it worth it in the end? Having the wake, the funeral, as hard as it was, is it? Are you glad you guys did that?
oh, absolutely. I mean, like I said, I think just like seeing people at the wake and like realizing how many people he like positively impacted,
Mm.
and just how many people cared about him, like that was really special. so I wouldn't have changed that. And then like the funeral, it was nice because my mom and I did the eulogy together, and like
Yeah.
afterward,
Well, your mom, like, she was so impressive. I remember thinking, because I hadn't met her at the time, or if I had, I didn't remember. So I was like, oh my gosh, she just told these stories, and it was like, but it's how we process, right? Like your dad is in the same amount of pain, and he was more like receding, which is just his personality. It's how he had to deal with it. Whereas your mom, it was like master of ceremonies for a while. They were telling the stories, and
yeah,
and you guys just did such a great job with that. That is not easy to do.
yeah, thank you. It was just I felt like it was nice because we kind of gave everybody a chance to like get to know what he was like
Yeah,
because like again all of his coworkers were at the funeral and
yeah.
they didn't know him when he was a kid and
Mm,
like people were telling us afterward like oh it was really cool to like just learn more about him and like one friend of ours was even like I had no idea that it was going to be like the comedy show because there were a lot of funny stories and it was
well, it's funny when you get people who I'm assuming a lot of them weren't used to being in church, and they're like, oh, like not that that's a normal church service, obviously, but they're just like you can be yourself in church, be funny, laugh,
yeah.
it gives them that introduction to it's okay. It's a part of that. Laughter is part of it, of processing grief sometimes. And I think that had to help them. Plus, the parents' pastor did a really great job of sharing the gospel, which is so important too. You know,
Yeah,
just an opportunity for people never to hear the hope that is in Christ.
right. And I mean, that was like our primary,
Goal.
goal was
Yeah,
to just like share the gospel,
yeah,
so that everybody would be able to hear it. And then, like, another thing that was a blessing to me was my brother's boss, Frank. I think he prayed and he shared a little bit about my brother. And so, like, going back to my, like, worries about, his faith and stuff and how he and I never really talked much about it. But Frank said that like he did talk to my brother a lot about faith and like
mm,
he was very, convinced that my brother
yeah. I
had
remember that.
faith and that like he just had a quieter way of like sharing it and that it was more kind of the way he lived than like him talking about it. But that was encouraging to
Yeah,
me
yeah. Like
and
I said earlier, I think hearing that, I agree, and I think I think Jordy would have shown that, right? Like it's hard to say because obviously God had a plan for him not to live longer, but I think being 31 and still not quite settled down in a lot of ways, but as that would have happened, he would have seen the need for more. Like what we would see, like normal kind of Christian fruit, like in church, and let's do that. But you can see by the amount of lives he touched that that he he had that inside him, and it just wasn't forming the way you would normally see it
yeah.
yet. And that must have been such a comfort to you, since that was such a hard part of the initial grief for you. It's like, well, what how much did he believe? That kind of thing.
Right. And then also my parents' pastor like touched on that too,
Yeah.
'cause he like shared the story about golfing with him for
Right.
several hours and like so that was a comfort. So like just to circle back to your question, like
Mm.
I am so glad that we had those services and
Yeah.
like it was a really important part of like processing it and like just getting that closure.
Yeah.
I mean it was difficult, but
Yeah, it's a very hard thing, but it's so and I asked that because someone may watch this and and maybe not now, but will go through maybe not even I'm not even saying tragic loss, but any loss, and not just being like let's just what do the find a burial spot, maybe do a little graveside, which is fine. It's not wrong, but it's you don't want to deal with it. The problem is that then you're not dealing with it, and if you don't deal with it, and it's going to be other ways that's going to come out. And again, it's not like it's closure is a terrible word because there's no closure to something like this,
right.
but it helps process
Hmm.
the reality of it. And again, you see all of those people. You wouldn't have had that opportunity to see the 500 plus people, the, the people at the funeral, and to see, yeah, he's gone way too soon, but he impacted this world powerfully, and that is sad, but it's also really uplifting,
Yeah.
to think about that. So, what about your kids having, you have different ages,
Yeah.
so you got the girls that are nine. How old are they now?
10 and 8.
10 and 8, and
Desmond's 5.
Desmond, right?
And Vivian was 2.
Yeah, so Vivian, obviously, you don't got to worry so much about that. But in Desmond, I mean, it must have been very different, like trying to talk to each one of them.
Yeah, and like honestly, like, Lucas was able to take that whole week off and like he was
Yeah,
with them most of the time because
yeah,
like I was at my parents' house so
yeah,
much I almost felt like I like didn't even see them until like 7 o'clock at night sometimes when
yeah.
they were all getting ready for bed.
Hmm.
But
When you did come home, was there any difference? Did they how did they like not know how to act around you? I mean, especially the older girls. Like what?
um they no, I think they were pretty, I don't know, not normal, but like I don't think they were trying to like dance around me. They were very
Yeah,
sensitive, I would say.
yeah,
Like Annabelle especially like knew how
mm,
sad I was. Like she's the oldest. She had the most time with him. Like she was really sad too, and she kind of like she like wears it on her sleeve a little bit more.
yeah,
Rosalie is a little bit more reserved and will kind of like hold it in until it
mm,
all comes like exploding out.
yeah,
Something that was really sweet that happened that week. I was getting ready to tuck Rosalie in, and I went down to get her water. And when I came back upstairs, she was holding Vivian like this, and she was like, "This is how Uncle Jordy used to hold you. Do you remember?" And it
yeah. I
like
remember
that
you
just
telling me that. That's
just
yeah,
made me cry
yeah.
because it
Oh,
was,
really? Yeah,
yeah,
that.
yeah, it's shocking, right?
Yeah,
But it was like she was
yeah.
so disturbed by the idea that her 2-year-old sister might not remember him. And she was like, I thought it was so sweet that she was trying to like, give her that reminder.
Mm.
And Desmond was funny because like he was definitely sad like the first day, and probably the first couple days, but like he just seemed to be able to compartmentalize it like more, like
Yeah,
he's able to like run off and play and kind of not think about it, and like
right.
he's able to like talk happily about when Jordy was alive. Although like I do remember times at night like before bed tucking him in where he would just be like, I miss Uncle Jordy.
Mm.
And Vivian, I felt like she was very intuitive where like
Hmm.
she she wasn't that emotional like herself because I don't know how much she really understands, but she knew that I was in pain.
Right.
And I just remember like if I was sitting on the couch and I was upset, like she just seemed to know exactly when to like give me a hug or like to snuggle with me.
Mm.
And like I remember initially thinking like, how am I gonna deal with this with like 4 little kids
Yeah,
and like a 2-year-old who still like needs me so much, but
yeah.
like I don't know, she like seemed to know that like I needed
Mm.
space when I needed space, and like she knew when to like comfort me. Like I don't know, that was kind of neat.
Yeah, that's a connection. I think we don't, and we in general, adults, we don't necessarily give kids enough credit for
Yeah.
who they are. They need to mature and learn, but they're souls and they're made in the image of God, and so there's a connection there, that a soul that like we don't quite understand all the time. And in moments like that, you see it's like, wow, she's really young, but she just has that understanding that she doesn't even understand how she has it.
Yeah.
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 And it's also a God thing. Just he knows that you didn't need you didn't need extra stress, extra stuff happening.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So in that again, that time, so it's that first week or so through the services. Um, what what was trying to say? It's like people are obviously trying to be there for you, and I mean obviously not just like your initial your direct family, but like friends or church or like what was particularly helpful? Because there's obviously, we're all, you've been in a position, maybe not, but with friends or someone who's going through something, you're like, I don't know what to do, right?
Hmm.
So what did they do? Did someone do, or different things that you're like, that's, they may not have understood how helpful that was.
Well, my first thought is like the Parisky family.
Yeah.
They are really good friends and our neighbors, and they watched Desmond during the
Mm,
wake, which was really helpful because
yeah.
like we didn't want all the kids at a funeral home for like 5 hours because
Yeah.
that was
Yeah. For that week, it was Desmond Parizki, right?
yeah,
He was with
yeah.
them so much.
And they they did bring me I think flowers and a card on my birthday, and they
Mhm.
brought dinner, and like they sat and like listened when I wanted to talk, and like prayed, and like they're amazing.
Yeah.
Just so supportive and like so helpful, and I could not be more grateful that God put them in our lives, and
Mm,
that like um just the relationship that we have is super special to
yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Um
So just being there and helping in any way you can.
yeah, and like
Yeah.
they just, they were so generous with their time to like, watch the kids and help. And Becky McCourt, she took the older two girls during the
Hmm.
wake, which was also really helpful. And just a lot of like women in the church did send me like sweet like birthday text messages, and just like saying that they were thinking of me and praying for me. And
Did that get overwhelming at times, all the messages?
um
Or was it helpful?
it was helpful. Like I didn't necessarily like put too much pressure on myself to like respond right away, but like
Good.
I just everybody was very like heartfelt,
Yeah.
and it was all very genuine. I didn't feel like it was just, oh, we're
Right.
just
Going through
reaching
the
out to
motion.
her because we're supposed to. Like everybody's so sweet.
Hmm.
And then we also had a meal train set up for us, which is always a blessing.
A lot of
And
casseroles and
um, I actually, like specifically, Rachel Martin
yeah.
brought me a meal one night, and
Hmm.
she didn't have a lot of time to like linger and chat because she was taking her kids to Bright.
Yep.
But like obviously she lost her brother,
Yeah.
several months before.
Yep.
And just like talking to her for those 10 minutes, like when she was dropping off the food, like we hugged, and like I just shared like, some of the questions, like, why him and why did it work out this way? And like she completely understood, and like it was just so nice to like make that connection and
Mm.
like feel like, oh my gosh, she knows exactly what I'm going through.
Mm.
And like it's just such a
Yeah.
blessing to like not
Yeah.
feel alone, and you
Mm.
know, so
Well, that brings up the whole point that like as hard as this is, God does use it. Like, and He will, and maybe already has for you. As far as you'll be like Rachel was for you in those 10 minutes, the opportunity to speak into someone's life, and they'll be like, you understand, in a
yeah.
way that someone else who loves you and wants to be there, but they just can't. They don't understand because you can't, certain things you can't understand until you experience them.
Right.
And so, it's it, God will use you in the years to come for in people's lives.
Right. And like, so I'll take that opportunity now to like talk a little bit more about how my relationship with God has been like deepened.
Yeah,
Cause like, so that first week, like I said, was kind of a blur and
yeah,
kind of just so many tasks. I didn't really even have that much time to like sit with God and like even wrestle with it.
mm.
But like after the funeral was
Yeah. That's a
over,
big time where it's like the world's moving on and it shouldn't, right?
right. So like that Saturday, I was like, what do we do? Like Rosalie had an indoor soccer game. Annabelle had
You're like
bre-
that should be canceled. What are we doing?
Annabelle had breakfast with Santa at school with like she's in chorus, so she had like a singing performance, and I was like, what do I do? Like, do I stay home and do nothing, or do I just like go? I opted to go. So like I think my dad and I went to the soccer game, and then we went over to the school to like finish up breakfast with Santa, which was really weird, and like looking back it was probably too much like at the time. Like it
Mhm.
was just very weird to like be among people who, are just like living their lives.
Yeah.
normally. And then but I don't know. I guess I was still maybe running a little bit on adrenaline. But like on that Sunday, I just remember like the depression
Mm.
sinking in like really badly. Like it was like, okay,
What did that feel like?
it just felt so dark.
Mm.
Um, I actually I should have brought a Bible, but in Psalm 55, maybe I'll just pull it up so I can actually quote it accurately. Um,
We don't need heresy here. All right. No, it's, you can summarize if you want.
well, as a perfectionist, I don't want to mess it up. So, but of course, now the phone is spazzing out and not. Look at this. It won't let me open Chrome.
Let me see. Don't worry.
Jeez Louise. Oh my
I
gosh.
don't know what our service up here is like either. So I think mine's coming up. Don't worry. He can edit some of this. Wow. Bible Gateway is really lame now. They like pull up ads and stuff.
Oh, how dare they?
Up there, they want to make money. So, okay. Psalm 55, you said?
Yeah. Thank you. So like the feeling was, okay, the funeral's over. Everybody's gone. Everyone's going back to their life.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm just like stuck trying to figure out how to like move on and what life is going to look like, going forward.
Right.
And I've never really like struggled with depression. That's not my personality, or like that's just not a
It hasn't
struggle
been a
I've
struggle
had.
for you. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but this was like very very real and very deep and very dark, of just feeling like I don't know. I guess that was when I felt like, God, like, where are you? Like, did you abandon us? Like,
Yeah.
what's going on? And so I finally like was cracking my Bible open,
Mm.
and
Psalms is a good place to go.
yeah, so that's where I went because I know like David
Yeah.
went through some really hard things.
Yeah.
But in Psalm 55 verse 4 it says, "My heart is in anguish within me. The terrors of death have fallen upon me. Fear and trembling come upon me, and horror overwhelms me. And I say, oh, that I had wings like a dove. I would fly away and be at rest. Yes, I would wander far away. I would lodge in the wilderness." And that was how I felt. I felt like, yeah, the terrors of death have come upon me. And if I could fly away and be away from all this, I would.
Mm.
So one thing I ended up doing was I called my parents' pastor, because like I started thinking again like about just my brother and like where he was.
Yeah.
And
Needed that golf outing and yeah.
yeah, and I was, I just like, I don't know. I like wanted to know that I was gonna like see him again, or like, have that hope.
Mm.
And so I just wanted to like ask him some more questions, like, like what else did you and my brother talk about? And like,
Yeah.
so we talked on the phone a couple days later. I think it might have been the Tuesday after. So like we're like maybe a week and a half in, and actually I'll need that for a second.
Yeah.
And he was telling me, he said, of course, he was like, I really can't like tell you, I can't guarantee, one way or the other, because obviously only God can know the
Right.
heart and
Right.
judge the heart.
Right.
But he's like, based on like any conversation that I've had with your brother, like I'm not worried about it. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that you need to worry about it. And I wouldn't just say that to you. Like he
Yeah.
was like, I really believe that.
Yeah.
But he also told me that you know, that Satan was going to use this time to really like wage an attack on me, like
Mm.
spiritually, and that
Mm.
like, he was like, he wants you to like shy away from God, and like he wants you to feel miserable. So he was like, I want you to pray, like, pray to Jesus and like ask him to make Satan flee from you so that you're protected and that like you're not in this pit. And that was really helpful to me, and I did that, and honestly, like the next day, I felt that cloud of depression start to lift. So then later on in the psalm, Verse 16, it says, "But I call to God, and the Lord will save me. Evening and morning and at noon I utter my complaint and moan, and he hears my voice. He redeems my soul in safety from the battle that I wage, for many are arrayed against me. God will give ear and humble them, for he who is enthroned from old, because they do not change and do not fear God." And then later it says, "Cast your burden on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never permit the righteous to be moved."
Mm.
So, like, I liked how it was the same psalm where David was saying, "Oh, the terrors of death have come upon me." And then he was saying, just a few verses later, "No, the Lord's going to save me and have compassion on me." So, like, that was really helpful to me.
Can you imagine going through that without having faith?
No, I can't. And, like,
Because so,
so,
so many people do, and I just feel for them. It's like, how do you sit in that pain, even angry with God and feeling distant, but still knowing you can call on Him, but not having that, you know?
yeah. And, like, that was something that I talked to my dad about, and just, I don't even remember who else, but, like, I did say, like, as difficult as this is, and as much as I don't necessarily understand like the plan and the purpose, like this would be so much worse if I
Mm.
didn't have faith, because
Yeah,
then it would really all be for
yeah,
nothing. Like,
meaningless,
yeah,
completely. And there's no help. Can't have help from someone who's not there.
right. So like, I don't know. The way that it's like impacted my relationship with God is just that it has made my faith like more real to me.
How come, do you think?
Just because like I know, like, I really know now that even when things are like terrible and when I'm suffering, like, that he's still there and that he's still good, and that, like, it was never, it never occurred to me, like, once during this process to be like, well, God abandoned me, so obviously, like, I'm gonna abandon him. Like, it never,
Right.
turning my back on God was just not like an option
Yeah.
for me. Like, I didn't feel like, he was mean or cruel or anything like that. And actually, during like the Bow series, the
Yeah.
first week, where you talked about believing, that sermon really spoke to me because you talked a lot about people in the Bible who suffered,
Mm.
and they chose to believe that God was good and that like he was trustworthy,
Right. It's a choice.
and that like and their souls were made right with God, and so they were able to like endure whatever suffering they
Mm.
had. And it wasn't like God fixed whatever situation they were in and then they trusted before.
Right.
And you talked about Mary and how much she had to suffer, watching Jesus die.
Mm.
And like that was just so helpful to me also, because it was like, yeah, like now I'm like among these saints who
Mm.
have really experienced suffering and really hard things and hard trials, and I know that my faith is real, and that like and I know that God is still good. Like I know that because I've experienced it, and
Yeah.
I believe it. So like it's just more genuine now.
Yeah. People will say it's a fairy tale, and you're just using it as a crutch. It's like how when you go through something like what you went through and are going through still, how could it just we're just tricking our mind into believing God exists. Like I don't ever get that. I mean, I get what people are saying because they never experienced what you experienced, but it's so real. Like there's no way that it's not like you just were like, I'm just going to pretend. It's like you're really crying out to God. You're really wrestling with some of the hardest things, and yet a peace came on you even in the greatest depression. Like it's such a good evidence, so I can see why that drew you closer to him. Like he's real.
Right, and I think like that's just the thing, like that peace that I experienced after I like prayed and asked God to like deliver me from those horrible feelings, and like
Mm.
reading that psalm and like
Yeah.
hearing, God listens when we cry out to him. like the peace that you feel, like that is not something that ever could have come from me.
Right.
Like especially not that quickly.
No, unless you're a
Like
crazy person and like a dual personality or something, but it's just not a.
the
I agree. Like, yeah, yeah.
so yeah, it's just and I guess it's hard to explain to someone like if
Mm.
they're skeptical and not going to believe it. I don't know what I could say that would convince them. But
Yeah,
like
I just would. I would implore anyone just to not try. Like open yourself up to the fact that nobody's gonna ever force you to believe, but like just because there's so many that don't. It's like they don't even. They've made up their mind. There's no God. There's no whatever. Or there's or whatever they believe, and it's like that. Instead, just why don't you step back and let God be real, or at least seek Him. We know what the Bible says. He will be found if you seek Him.
right.
Especially if you're in pain or in a trial. Like whatever that might be. So He drew you closer. So you've now it's been we're now in April, so a little over 4 months,
Hmm.
right? So that's still pretty raw. You probably have some days, some moments where like what's it like now, or what's it the process been like after the initial depression and God giving you that peace? What's that been like, or what is it like now?
Yeah, it's definitely um it can still be hard. Um
Yeah,
I think sometimes I get stuck on like okay, this is still like our reality and like this is
you had to go through the holidays pretty quick too, like Christmas and all that, right?
right,
Yeah.
right. Um Christmas actually somehow was okay. I hosted just to take that burden off of my parents.
Yeah.
And I tried to make it like special but like low stress, but I made a chicken dinner. Everybody enjoyed the food. We played Wii games together. And it was a good like family bonding experience. So although it was challenging, I feel like it was as good as it could have been given the circumstances.
Part of you had to been thinking, knowing Jordy, which is so hard, but it's like if he could tell you, it's like, guys, don't sit around and mope.
Yeah, and like
Especially being with the Lord, which we believe he is. He definitely would say that. But regardless, just like his personality would be like, let's not all mope around. Let's have fun.
right, right. Like he was so fun.
Yeah.
That's just who he was. And that was one thing my older brother Ryan said a lot was like he wouldn't want us to be miserable and like, depressed.
Yeah.
So,
But you are. So,
right,
and he
right.
would be like, if it happened to you when he was left, he wouldn't just be like, let's have fun. Like, he would be miserable and depressed. He would lose his sister. So, but there's a balance there. And I
Hmm.
think, did you ever feel, and I suspect the answer is no, but correct me if I'm wrong, but did you ever feel like pressure on how to mourn? Like, I should be sad right now, but I'm not.
Yeah, I actually did, like, especially in the very beginning when I mentioned that, like, sometimes I just felt like a robot and,
Yeah.
like, because, my dad would be crying and, like, and whoever else was around would be crying and I would just be, like, sitting there, like a zombie. And part of me was like, what's wrong with you? Like, why aren't you crying? But, like, you can't, I guess you
Right.
can't force it and it comes out randomly. And
Yeah.
something that another thing that was helpful was like listening to just worship music. Like
Mm.
sometimes in like the weeks following, I'd just be doing dishes and I'd have like worship songs on and I'd be picking ones, about suffering through trials and like that would get me to cry, which was like a nice
The
release.
good cry, almost. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that was another thing too, like listening to lyrics about, people that have experienced hard things and still had faith that like made me feel like, yeah, like I get this now. Like now I get it. It's really real. Like I actually mean it when I sing like it is well
Mm.
with my soul.
Mm-hmm.
Like it has so much more meaning now.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's what life does. It crystallizes. Do we really believe it or not? You
yeah.
know. How was the rest of your family? I know it's been a real struggle for your parents, especially your dad.
Yeah, it's one of the most difficult things about this being so unexpected is just that it's such a long process to like tie everything up. Like you said, you know, all of his stuff is still there and like he owned a home. So like we have to like you know, get rid of his items and like organize things and then get his home like ready to sell.
Mm,
And that's just all very painful. Like I've only been to his house once since it all happened, but like I went with my mom to help her do laundry one day and like it was terrible like being in there and just like seeing how neat he kept everything and like he was such a like responsible homeowner like in his basement, you know, he has all the tools and all the right things like and like I know that about him. Like
yeah,
I know
yeah,
he's a responsible kid, but like seeing his space and like kind of having it be more real
yeah.
was like, man, why does he have to be gone? You know, it kind of brought that back and it was sad.
Who had to do a lot of that?
My mom has been doing most of it. She kind of finds it comforting to like
Yeah.
be in his space and like be around his stuff.
Yeah, you know, when I said especially your dad, that's probably unfair to your mom. It's really hard for her. She just, they process it differently. She is trying to get her way through it by like doing and like you said, she talked to him. Your dad needed to leave the room. And that's just like who we are as people, you know, and like there's no rules on grief. It's trust Jesus and walk and whatever that might mean in that
Yeah.
moment is what it means, you know. So that sounds like what she's continued to do is like, you know, and she, in some of my brief conversations with her, she said things like, you know, like we are not, like we're gonna trust God in this. We are not, you know, like she said, a death of a child is a high percentage of splitting couples up, and she's like, that's just not happening to us. Like we are gonna stick to each other. And it's just like she's just very determined, which is so admirable. When you lost your son, like there's nothing worse.
Yeah, I think there's definitely been like a lot of grace because they obviously do have different personalities and like different ways of processing.
Yeah, that's why there's always so much pain. You should be acting this way. You should be, and it's just like that. Yeah, that grace for each other has to be there,
Yeah.
man.
So, like I don't feel like recently I don't like get as sad anymore because it's just, I don't know. I've kind of come to a point where it just kind of is what it is. I mean, I'm not happy about it, obviously.
Right.
But like sometimes I still feel like, you know, I can't believe that this is what our life is now.
Mm.
And I guess in some ways, I don't even know. I don't even know if my brain has still fully like wrapped, like, I don't know if I've wrapped my brain around it fully.
I'm sure you probably haven't, you know.
Like in some ways, it just feels like he's still on like a really long vacation. Like he
Yeah.
moved to Hawaii and we'll see him in September or something. So I don't know if it's just gonna be like a long year until we get to that anniversary and it kind of cements it more fully.
Have you had any dreams about him since?
I have, yeah. I had a handful like in the month following,
Hmm.
and I had a couple in like the last few weeks. It's sad, like they all seem to have the same theme where like I'm trying to like save him from his fate.
Oh man, that's rough.
Yeah, like there's were a few in the beginning where I knew that he was gonna be getting in a car accident, and so I would like ask him to like stay home and like not
Yeah.
get in the car or like in one of the dreams I was like, well, I'll go with you, like thinking I'd be able to like stop him, and then in the dream I thought, no, but I can't because then I'll die too and I'll leave my family. Like
Oh
it's
my
just,
gosh.
I know
Wow.
it's weird. Like I've always had very vivid dreams,
Hmm.
so yeah, they're very detailed. And in a different dream I had, we thought that like we knew that he had died, and I called his phone randomly like 2 weeks later because we were going to my mom's birthday dinner, and he answered the phone, and I was like shocked, and I was like, "You're alive?" And he was like, "Yeah," and I'm like, "Are you coming to dinner?" And he was like, Yeah, and then I talked to this man who was watching me, and I was like, "It's my brother. Like, we all thought that he had died, but he's here." So that was a crappy one to wake up
Wow.
from.
You're like, yay, no.
Yeah. So,
Dreams. Man,
a-
dreams are weird.
and a different one too. Like, I mean, I remember all of them pretty well, but he, my dad was like getting some award for having had a heart attack, and my brother was there, and he was crying.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Dreams, man. Oh, that's so funny.
But my brother was crying and he was like, I wish I was still here to help take care of him, and that was sad.
Oh,
Because when my dad had his heart attack, my brother was at the hospital like all the time. So
hmm.
yeah, the dreams they hit you right in the heartstrings.
Yeah, I guess when I asked that question, I was just thinking, like, just in general, I wasn't thinking, man, like, that's wow. Because I always hear people, I am not envious of that at all. But like when I lost my mom, it's like I don't think I've ever had a dream where she's been in it. I mean, I'm sure maybe I have, I just don't remember. But I always wanted, especially early on, because again, she had a heart attack and died, and it was like sudden, and so you don't have that opportunity. And I'm always saying to people, it's like it's a catch-22. You don't want your loved one to suffer and linger. You wouldn't have wanted Jordy to die of some horrible cancer where you watch him die. Nobody wants that. You'd rather it be sudden, as bad as a car accident is, for his sake. But you get to grieve a little bit. You get to kind of process that if someone has an illness or they're older or whatever. But it's like they're here and then gone. It's like you want to just see him that one last time, sort of like what you described the morgue, but that's not seeing him really. Like it's a finality, but just talk to him. Even if I could talk to him one last time or talk to her, and you can. It's like a dream could sort of do that, but not that kind of dream.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. But and that feeling you're describing of like, oh, I just want one more chance. That was
yeah.
how I felt when Lucas woke me up and told me that day. It was like, wait a minute, what? Like that news is so final and it's so life altering, and it was just like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean he's already dead? Like I would have preferred for him to say he's in a coma,
Right. You
and
can
they're
have
hoping he'll wake up.
right, and then yeah.
But yeah, the finality of it is just awful.
Well, that's probably why you felt so numb. I mean, God given of us protections, and that it's like our mind just only lets in so much because it's too much, and you needed to like you couldn't just the floodgates. You experienced that moment in the morgue. I think that's what that was. It's like the floodgates opened, and
Yeah,
you can't be dealing with that nonstop. That's too much. So
right.
too much pain. So what would you what kind of advice would you give to someone? Not necessarily the exact circumstance of you, but like similar, just kind of grief that's kind of shocking and sudden and not something they expected. What would you say to them? What kind of counsel would you give them? I know it's a lot,
Boy,
but
pressure's on
I
for
know
this one.
no pressure.
Um, I don't know. Like, I guess to just be like gentle with yourself and your loved ones, and like try not to have like expectations of like, if this one is processing one way and it's different from what you're doing, like try to have that understanding, because it's so important to like have, just extend grace to each other and not like feel like someone's doing it wrong.
Hmm.
And just, I don't know, like it's hard not to sound like cliche, right? Because I feel like, sometimes Christians can have all these like packaged little slogans that sound so nice, but they're hard when you're actually walking through a trial.
Yeah.
But like just, I mean, just to know that like God is still with you and that he hasn't abandoned you, and that like you can take your pain to him, and that
Mm.
like you don't have to hide your pain and your anger and your like ugly feelings from him, because he already knows what you're feeling, and like the more vulnerable and honest you are with him, I think the more the easier it will be to heal, which actually reminded me of another thing that was helpful.
Mm.
So I have a sister-in-law. It's Lucas's brother's wife,
Mm-hmm.
and she lost her father a couple of years ago,
Mm.
which was unexpected and really devastating for their family. And she told me, like in the week following my brother's death, that when her dad died, she finally like went back to church. She said like during the worship for like months she could not worship. Like she just was
Mm.
so angry and like felt because like they had prayed for him and like they were convinced that like God was going to heal him and
Mm.
like save his life, and that's not what happened.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just really hard. But so she said, when like everybody in church would be singing, I was just kind of like having it out with God, and I was like saying, I can't sing, like I don't trust you right now. And she admitted that, and she said, I just don't know how to trust you again. I don't know when I will. And she said that in that vulnerability, God was mending her heart. And like, I don't know exactly how long it took, but however many weeks or months, like slowly, she just was able to like worship again and
Mm.
feel that trust again. And like, again, that was really helpful to me. Like, anytime someone who has suffered shares, what that was like for them in their relationship with God, it's just such an encouragement and such a help. And I felt like, yeah, he can handle it. Like he knows what we're feeling, like he knows the pain, and like just remembering that he experienced such great suffering like
Mm.
before he went to the cross and while he was on the cross. Like I don't know, he's not a God who doesn't get it. Like he
Mm-hmm.
completely gets it.
Mm.
And so I
And he's
just
also a God who cares.
right, he cares and
Mm.
he's with us right in it.
Yeah.
And
Wow, it's like your sister-in-law lived Psalm 55. She lived it out because it's like, or not just that psalm, but a lot of the lament psalms, they do turn at the end, and it's just like this journey in a psalm. It's verses, but it's probably took the same amount of time for David as it or
right.
more of like going from what are you doing? I don't understand you at all to I can praise you again, and
Hmm.
that's that process, and it's so hard, but it's so beautiful what
Yeah.
God does in it.
And she's just a wonderful person of faith and like somebody to look up to and somebody who really ministered to me when I really
Mm.
needed it. So,
So what then would you counsel someone who is a friend of or a family member of or that is like what do you do, what do you maybe not do? Not saying that someone did that to you, but is there any, because we're always like what do we do, like I
oh
don't know.
yeah. Um, I don't know. I know like everybody has the best of intentions, so I don't want to like
No, I know.
sound like anything was bad, but I guess like definitely call before you show up at someone's
Yeah,
house.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's just 2024 people, right? Like, come on.
Offer food
Hmm.
because it's probably pretty likely that the grieving family is not going to be in any condition to like cook or think about it.
Hmm.
But maybe just check, because what happened was that my parents got so much food at once that like it was impossible to eat all of it.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that
And
too.
we
Yes.
hate wasting food, but unfortunately there was just no way to consume all of it within a reasonable period of time. So
You're also not super hungry. I mean,
no, it's weird. It's like you have to eat to like stay alive, but you don't
yeah,
really have an appetite.
right.
So maybe small portions and maybe like things that are like frozen and can
Hmm.
be heated
Hmm.
like when necessary.
Hmm.
Don't feel like you have to have like these flowery words or like you have to know what to say. Like it's I don't know. I feel like in some ways it's okay to just like show up and kind of just sit quietly and like,
Mm.
you know, be present with
Yeah, like we
people.
said with Job's friends, first week they were great. After that, they opened their mouths.
Right, right.
And sometimes just sit there, or just it might you can sense the mood, and it's a joke's okay or not, and you just kind of be there, right?
Yeah, and it just reminded me too of Another family that was really helpful was the McGanns, Margot and Evan.
Yeah.
Just, I spent a lot of time at her house when she would just like listen to me and, you
Yeah.
know, be
Not only an awesome person, she's also a counselor, so that
like,
helps.
yeah, but just a very like calming, supportive
Yeah.
presence. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you having that conversation. I know this, like I said to you, it's not. I wouldn't have blamed you if you're like, yeah, I don't want to talk about that. But the idea is for people, what I want is because we don't have enough time in the church to talk in depth about pain and struggle and not just, yeah, I was struggling and now I'm better, or like it's not a 2 hour movie. Life is not like that, or an episode of a show, or a novel it's painful, and it's a process, and it's ugly at times, and I want people to be encouraged, like, don't give up, so I really appreciate you sharing your story, and just being willing to minister to others through it. And I know God's going to give you a lot of opportunities to be there for people as they were there for you, because that's how life goes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just made me think of something else that I would tell someone in grief is like, don't believe that God doesn't love you because he allowed something terrible to happen in your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
He still does, even if it's hard to feel it. So
Amen.
I
Amen.
guess that's a good note to
Yeah.
close on.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it, Grace.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right.